Okay, so you already know Professor Kavuskin, and he's initiating this global competency certificate. And today our guest speaker is Ahmet Bozer from Coca-Cola, and I give the word to Professor Kavuskin. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. We may have lost a basketball game. I think we have a game that we're going to win on Sunday.
What game y'all talking about?
That's going to be a pause for celebration, right? And I think the parade will be on Peachtree. So I don't know if Professor Hilde will let you go watch the parade, because I'm sure it's going to be, Monday morning, probably class time. But maybe you can make an exception, so that's something to look forward to. And you talked about quiz, and what we are discussing today will be on the test too, right? Students like to ask, will this be on the test? Yes, it will be on the test. But we are very privileged, honored to have a very special speaker with us this morning. It's not every day that we get a high-ranking executive through our classes at Georgia State, but this young man here is one of ours actually. He's a Georgia State graduate, just like you will be in a few months, most of you. He's an alumnus of the Robinson College of Business, so that's very special. And I share something with him because his undergraduate school was also my alma mater, so I'm very proud of as well that feature. Ahmet Bozer has a distinguished career. He's very young, he's got many more years to go, but he's already made a big impact, primarily with Coca-Cola Company. After he got his degrees, the last one, Master of Science in Information Systems from Robinson College, he worked for Coopers and Lybrand here in Atlanta for several years. They do auditing, financial services, and so on. Then he joined the Coca-Cola Company, also headquartered in Atlanta, right? And then he took up positions in his native country, in Turkey, rose through the ranks. He was first responsible for the financial side, and then division president of Eurasia. Eurasia is the largest setup division within the Coca-Cola geography. They have something like 90 countries, so he was responsible for some 90 countries where Coca-Cola does business. There are only 2 countries where Coca-Cola does not do business, right? Do you know what those countries are? You can guess. North Korea. There you go. And are we planning to go on to Cuba sometime?
Well, yeah, and to the extent that the legislation starts allowing.
Right. So imagine a multinational company. When we talk about multinationals, one is the one feature, distinguishing that feature of multinationals is their global footprint. But I don't know very many multinational companies that are in almost every country, with the exception of 2. So they do have a huge geographic footprint. Ahmet, for many years, he was responsible for Eurasia and Africa group, which is 90 countries in that. And then he took up other positions. He actually, when he was in Turkey, he also worked for the bottlers. As you know, Coca-Cola is a franchise system, right? There's a company, a corporate organization, and there's a franchise. These who are bottlers, right? They are independent, corporate independent organizations. So he worked for Coca-Cola bottlers in Turkey as finance director, then director, and then rejoined the Coca-Cola Company corporate in 2000. And then he rose again. He took up significant positions, and most recently he was the president of International. So that's really the most important position in Coca-Cola when you consider that some 80% of sales and revenues come from international markets outside of North America. Again, there's not very many multinational companies where the dependency on international markets is that high, is that intense, some 80%. But Ahmet is an ordinary person. You'll get to know him a little bit today. I've had the privilege of knowing him over the years. He's very approachable, he's very kind, very genuine. His current project, he will tell us, I think, a little bit about that. He's writing a book. And in fact, part of his presentation today that we will be exposed to soon is a chapter, I think, in his book. So we're looking forward to reading that book and learning about personal development and leadership qualities. I think you get the idea from this chart here. He's devoted a lot of time to philanthropic organizations, charitable organizations, as well as business groups. For example, he served as the chairman of the U.S.-Turkey Business Council, U.S.-Brazil Business Council. These are highest business council of business people appointed by the U.S. president. And he serves on our RCB, Robinson College Board of Advisors as well. So I will not take up much more time because it's very important for us to spare our very limited time with the conversation. I think he's got some comments, as you can see from the handout that he can provided for you. With that, I'd like to ask Ahmet to start this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being here.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that glorified introduction. I'll try to live up to the expectations here. When Dr. Çavuşgil and I talked about the global competency model, it is a common passion for both of us because all throughout my career, the way I was thinking is, what is the picture of good for me and what is the picture of good for the people that I work with? What is a good leader? What is a good international set of skills? This has been occupying our minds for a long time. I was working on something. I've seen the global competency model, and our interests have matched, and it would be, I said, good opportunity to share that. What I'm going to try to do is I've studied the global competency model, if you will. I'm going to try to put a practice spin to it because I have not done one iota of scientific research in my life, but I have lived through some things. But I've had the curiosity to try to find what I would call the truth about things. And that always evolves. One of my messages would be that you see the global competency model here, you'll get the certificate, you will see something from me here, but you also have to be in the same mode. If you're interested in growing yourself, in developing yourself, none of us really know the truth about what's best. We try to come close to that approximation. Now, one of the truths that I adopted for myself is that when people were asking me when my responsibilities for a number of countries grew to 90 countries, how do you deal with all these differences between Africa and India and Russia? I said, well, the way you deal with the differences is that you don't focus on the differences. You focus on what I call the common currency. Because at the end of the day, business, like everything else in life, is about dealing with people. What makes you successful are your relationships with people. And that's a deeper word than what it may sound like. Whether people see you as competent, whether they see you as trusted, you're easy to work with, and you're constructive, etc. That works everywhere. In every culture, there is a common currency. I mean, the common currency works in every culture. The differences are the salt and pepper of this thing. You can, make few culturally unique statements, but the core of your message is always the same. So when I was trying to develop something, I tried to focus on what that common currency is. Now, the other disclaimer I would put out when you're thinking of how should I develop myself, what's a good international skill set. Also, be careful of generalizations. when you talk about global companies. There are so many different forms of global companies. And I try to use some words. First of all, the reach. Some companies may be just doing business in Americas, North America and Mexico and Brazil. They may call themselves global. Or you could be like Coca-Cola, that you're in 200 plus countries. But then it's also your business model. So I call it, do you have roots or do you have tentacles? By roots, what I mean is that you're invested in those countries. You have investments, you have people, you have relationships, and those countries can actually make you or break you. Or you could have tentacles. You might have a central production here in the United States, and you're exporting to all these countries. Yes, on paper, you can say you do business in 70 countries, but you're exporting from there. These are all different business models. They all call themselves global. Then, when you think about yourself, if you're going to be in an international career, not only you need to understand the kind of global company you're dealing with, but also the type of the position you're in. We generally break them into front-facing positions versus enabling positions. Front-facing are those that touch the customer, that touch the outside world. Enabling are those that are more service. And then you could be in the field location. You're actually fighting the battles in the field all the time, or you could be in the central command in the headquarters. So whatever skill set you're looking at, even though there's a common currency, but there is different, it just comes in different shapes and forms, and there's different manifestations of these skills in those different dimensions. So please keep that in mind. At the end of the class, if we have time, I'll throw out a thinking exercise for you to try to put color to what I just said about this. So let's talk a little bit about this model. I just have one chart. That's all we're going to talk about today. I'll give you a bit of history of how this came about. Because I cared so much about this, so every year you get a memo from Human Resources Department, and it says to us, well, you need to do your performance plans for the people that report to you, for yourself, and you need to do evaluations. I keep asking to myself, how does one evaluate somebody's performance? Well, the human resources will give you the forms. Okay, these are the skills, this is the performance criteria, all of that. They call them competency models. I'm sure you've studied that. I look at these competency models, and it just never fully resonates with me. Because I'm doing business, I work with these people every day, and I see results, I see behaviors, but what the Human Resources Department is trying to fit me into in this form, I just felt it didn't work. So I felt I have to take ownership of, because the people responsibility are the manager's responsibility. Human resources is supposed to help you think through this. But if what they're giving you wasn't helping you, you don't go with a bureaucratic mindset and said, I'm just going to fill out the form. No, we're going to have a conversation. So if I'm the supervisor, what is the right conversation? So I kept thinking, these models didn't work for me. I understood why, which I won't go into, how these things come up. So I tried to create my own. And I tried to help HR to say, maybe this is how we should do it. Of course, what I did didn't resonate with them. But it's always an imperfect science. But you never have to give up your desire to keep thinking about what is good. So I'm going to say some things to you today. Take what resonates, but keep thinking. Keep producing that vision of right skill sets for you. So basically, it is what I call the picture of good in my mind. When I was preparing this, I said, maybe this is for high levels in the organization. Yes, because I was at high levels when I was doing this. But when I really sit back and think about it, it is really very applicable. So for example, something like belief or courage, they have different levels of importance at higher levels, but they are still very important. So if when you're starting your career, all of you hopefully will get in your first step in and you'll get started. I know that's probably the most critical thing right now. And it is. But it's not everything. And it's a long journey. You're going to be working for 30 years, 40 years. If you make good use of that, hopefully less. Some of you are saying, we don't want to work that long. If you actually have a picture of good for your own skills and keep developing yourself, you'll never be perfect. You'll always be looking for progress over perfection. But you got to make progress towards something that you believe is good. That's what this is, in my view. In my view, that's what it is. So one of the things I thought that was wrong with the competency model is they just basically say is, here's a competency model in the company that we got, and there was a list of competencies. I thought I should have 3 words instead of competencies, because in reality, when I look at my performance or somebody else's performance, well, I look at, have they delivered their accountabilities? And when you ask that question, a lot of people can say, yes, I have made so much profit. But how did you deliver those accountabilities? Was it external circumstances that helped you out in that and you got lucky? That happens. Or, thinking deeper about that. That was one component. The other thing we could see is I call them behaviors. How does this person behave? Because I can see that. I can see the behavior. Whether somebody in a meeting is sort of including people in the conversation or basically dismissing people in the conversation. I mean, I could see those behaviors. So instead of again, competency, that was the second term I used. So there's going to be some behavioral characteristics. But then there's this foundational where competency models don't get into at all. But those are the ones that's most important. So for example, if you're in a leadership position, you will get there, believe me. And hopefully you remember this. There are too many leaders that came out and say something, but the audience sees that they really don't believe what they're saying. In business, you see that because they have more of a bureaucratic attitude. They've made it to a certain position. They have to preserve that position. It's all of those things, but sort of a bit of a missionary zeal. I really believe in our direction. I really believe in how we're going to get to our direction. You don't see this too many times. There are people who are like that, but there are a lot of people that you could see does this. Because if you don't believe yourself, what you're doing and what you're saying, nobody else, they will not call it, they will not speak about it, but you won't be followed. Or courage. From time to time, you're going to have to make tough decisions. Courage, when displayed in the right way, inspires people. I'm not talking about stupidity. But so I figured when people say competency, there's really actually those 3 things that we should think about. There are some foundational characteristics that's probably in the character of the person or the upbringing or their own, whatever you call, some nature, some nurture. There are some behavioral characteristics that they display, and there's a way they go after the accountabilities that they have to fulfill. So if I dissect the word competency into those 3 components, then I have a better picture because each one of them I can talk about instances, how a person acted, behaved, where I could debate that. Even with this, of course, nothing is black and white. It really isn't. But it's a better way to, I felt, have a dialogue about, or first think about yourself as you're looking at yourself in the mirror. That's how all these things should start. What I want to do is say a couple of things. Having worked in a Western cultured company, but having come from a bit of an Eastern cultured country, And being really in the crossroads in Turkey, you're in the crossroads of Eastern, and you see everything. One thing I noticed is that I'm a Western educated person. The Western education is very much focused on analysis. So if you have a problem, you break it into its parts, you assign it to people, and then The Eastern is a lot more on synthesis. There's not, in the philosophy, even in the medicine it comes out. If you go to American medicine, if you go to an eye doctor, he's specialized on the eye. But if you go to an Eastern doctor, it's more the system. So I think what's in this model, one point I will make is, what is most important is to recognize that it is sort of one package. It's all interrelated. And as you are defining your picture of good, always keep the whole and always be aware of the interrelationships between them. So I'll give you an example here, and we'll do a little exercise. One of the strategic challenges of companies becomes this. I call it abandoning the core question. So you have a core business. And, Coca-Cola is a great example of that, sparkling beverages. That core business makes you successful for years. You grow your profits. It works very well. But something happens, or take IBM, mainframes during our times. That was the core business. Then it started to get smaller. So some things start happening in your environment, which people start talking about, oh, your core is in danger. Your core is in danger. So you're dead. What are you going to do? You're going to change. You got to abandon your core before others do that to you so that you change. This is not such an easy decision. Sometimes what looks like your core is under threat isn't really a threat. And if you believe as a company that your core is under threat and you change, you kill yourself. Now, sometimes it's true. So this is business. It's never black and white. So when you are preparing a strategy for a company, and the decision you have to make is, do I make investments behind new products, or do I keep investing in core? Because resources are not unlimited. When you decide to go for new products, then you don't invest as much in core. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start believing more that your core is dead. You actually then kill your core. Or you could say, no, the core is good. You can't invest as much in new products. Then people blame you. They say, well, you're not innovating. So here you have to make a judgment. Okay. So that comes to one of our core characteristics. How is this person's judgment? Do we consider that it is sound and healthy judgment? Then you have to ask the next question. How does one make good judgment? There was this, I'm sure you've heard this, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from poor judgment. So there's a bit of that. You're going to make mistakes and learn from that. But the question is, are you just living for the day and the event, or are you accumulating your learnings? So I would throw, for example, for this judgment, I would throw 3 things if you want to develop good judgment. First of all, a judgment about a situation or a person. You can make judgments about people. You can make judgments about your relationships. You can make judgments about strategy. You make judgments all the time. When those judgments are right, you make progress. So what makes good judgment is, first of all, to always have a multi-stakeholder approach in your mind. So whatever situation you're dealing with, so let's say if this is this, abandoning the core or not abandoning the core. Who are the stakeholders involved in this? There's consumers who produce it. There's media who talk about it. There's your people inside the company. There's your shareholders. So when you consider this decision from the standpoint of multiple stakeholders, in an inclusive way, okay, because these stakeholders are represented by different people. So I can go and ask investor relations, what do you think the investors think about this? Or I could go and speak with media relations. So in order to make judgment, I really have to be inclusive so that I am best informed. Then, I have an accountability called strategy. I have to come up with the right strategy. And I do have to execute that strategy, which means if I'm going to go into the new products, let's say, that's a huge change for the company. Then I'm going to have to be good in leading change. That's one of my accountabilities. Do you see how it's all interrelated? If you picked one thing, therefore, the whole point of this model is keeping the full picture in your mind, understanding it, keeping it in your mind, working on it parts at a time, for sure. You can't work on everything. You have to work on it parts at a time. And you have to think about, whatever you're facing, okay, I think in this specific case, it really calls for this or that, and it's an opportunity for me to grow. It's time that I really need to test whether I believe in this, whether I believe in this company that I'm working for. See what I'm saying? I gave you an example of belief as a leader. If you didn't feel I was believing what I'm saying, you're not going to follow me. But if you just joined a company, if you ask yourself, companies are like families, right? You got to feel good about the company that you're working for, what they stand for, what their growth prospects are. At some point in time, do you believe this company's story? That gets you to another question. Well, I need to understand this company's story. You see what I'm saying? As you have this model in front of you, you could pick any one of those things, and it leads you to have yourself ask questions to yourself to get to a point. That process of asking yourself questions gets you more curious, gets you more big picture. And then you just keep walking that path. That's how this model is used. So then I want to give you, for each one of these things, especially the behavioral characteristics, and to some extent the foundational, I want to give you a 3-step process to deal with each one. What do you do with this? So we live in such a media world that when you talk about inclusiveness, pretty much everybody says the same thing. It's very hard to find different things. How do you differentiate yourself? If inclusiveness is an important skill, how do you differentiate yourself? So 3 steps. First of all, everything starts here with you. You have to ask yourself the question, do you believe that when you're working as part of a team or as a leader of a team, having an inclusive atmosphere is actually good? Do you really like that? Do you really like the fact that, people from different cultures contribute different thoughts, different backgrounds? Do you really like that? Do you really enjoy that? And the second question you ask, do you intend to hold the flag for that? If you actually start with yourself and say, yes, I really believe that. If you don't believe that, take it out of the model, put whatever you want to put in. But whatever you put in, you have to believe it, that it is the right thing. So that's the first step. Start with yourself and check your intentions that this is what you like. Then, I said 3, but actually it's 2. The third one is specific to inclusiveness. Then you should go above the clutter. When people talk about inclusiveness, okay, we'll have all the races, all the genders, and all this, and all these things included. If that's the mindset you have, you're going to be like everybody else. Okay. Of course that's the case. You will never, ever discriminate against anyone because of any of those factors. Of course, that's given. That's the price of entry. But if that's what your inclusiveness thinking is all about, you're not going to differentiate yourself from others. So what I propose is that inclusiveness is not necessarily about including people with different physical attributes or preferences for lifestyle. Well, that's fine. It's really about differences here. And that's what the difficult. So therefore, how do you make sure that you benefit from the most from people in terms of different thinking? And the way it happens, I call it the barrier remover approach. There's always barriers to this. You just need to be aware of the barriers, and if you can remove those barriers, that's how you differentiate yourself. So what are the barriers to being inclusive? Let's say you all want to have, you decide to do something this weekend, 5, 6 of us. And let's say you have 2 very good close friends, and you always see eye to eye. And you may be tempted to just talk to that friend. You always see eye to eye. You always share the common thing. Let's do it. But then there's a third one. It's a little bit different. You tend not to go that way because you say, oh, if I go, he's going to say this, it's going to be a problem, this and that. Business, it's a bit like that. But because now in business you have a responsibility to the shareholders and to your boss, to your department, you actually have to invite those different skills. So the barrier basically is you try to avoid conflict. You don't like to have conflict. If you recognize that in yourself and in others, and if you remove that, that makes you a more inclusive person. You can remove that in a positive way. Another barrier is like overconfidence. I have done that myself many times. I don't have time. I know this is right. I've already talked to these people. I don't need to get more. But there's this dissenting voice there keeps telling something. Hey, I know. He's always like that. Or she's always like that. Now, I've said this, but please apply one other thing to it. Balance. You have to balance for the circumstances that you find yourself in. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to cut it short. Sometimes you have to include. So, but the important thing is to go beyond what common popular culture says about these things. So,
If you have an example there, I know that in your notes, call it part of
yes, let's see where I put that one. Yes. Thank you. That's a very good one. While I was in Turkey, we, of course, every time you do a strategic plan, you look at your competitors and potential competitors and what they may do and what should be your strategy. So we knew a strong local company was going to enter into beverage business. And with all our analysis and everything, we figured out, okay, this is our conventional thinking. Our cola product is excellent and nobody can do the same, and it has such a special, unique taste. So therefore, we are safe if the cola product comes, but maybe on our orange products and other things that others can come closer to. So we were so confident. We put all our efforts into the flavors, and we did a pretty good job. I think it worked. And we said, okay, good. See, exactly worked how we thought. And come 4th of July, was quite a meaningful day, when during the, I think it was the first Iraq War, there was some thing flared up between Turkish soldiers and American soldiers, and it was on papers, and there was, anti-American feelings. And that day comes this local product with a cola. And Chevy Chase playing in the advertising, and he drinks this product in New York, and the moment he drinks, he grows mustache and he becomes Turkish. And it was a funny, actually, video, and it made a lot of sound, made a lot of noise. And So for some time, actually their results were going very well. This was the overconfidence. We were overconfident. We did not think about it. Now, part of that is we then have to ask ourselves, why in the group, we were probably 10, 12 of us looking at this strategy. Why was it that none of us could challenge the other to say, yeah, you keep saying, flavors is going to be the problem, but what if cola? So that means we just did not have necessarily a robust enough, diverse environment. So that's the example I wanted to use, but for the overconfidence side. Given the time, and I want to give time for questions and answers, I just picked one from each. So I picked inclusiveness as an example here. Change as another example. One, the reason for inclusion of that word in the accountability axes of this model is, unfortunately, we live in a world that is changing faster for some reason. It's changing faster, and change is very uncomfortable. But we're wired to be comfortable as people. So we have to deal with this requirement to change and live with being healthily uncomfortable. I mean, that's the way I can put it. And this is one of the hardest things. We don't personally change. We don't look ourselves in the mirror and decide that we need to change, because sometimes we can decide and we try to change and it's so uncomfortable and we don't change. But in a leadership environment, when the organizations have to change, leading that change, making that change happen in a positive and healthy way is the responsibility of the leader. That's why I call it an accountability of the leader. To recognize what needs to change and then change it and bring people along together. And one of the executives I worked with in the past had a business challenge, very successful. This is the hardest thing about change. Something makes you successful for 10 years, but the environment changes, and what made you successful for 10 years is not going to make you successful for the next 5. To recognize that and change is the most difficult thing, because you have no reason to change. Because you look at the past, you say, everything worked. So I've spent a lot of time with this executive, exactly a situation like this. And we've written down what needs to change, why it needs to change. We have agreed to everything. But there's just something in each one of us. We just can't take that step to make that change. I just wanted to give that example to be aware of this. When we're so attached to things, like I throw something at you. Think about one of your best moments that you felt achieved and that you felt good about yourself. Then ask yourself the question, why did it work so well at that time? And the way you answer that question to yourself, if it is things like, because, I worked hard at it, and therefore it happened, then you're telling yourself, if I work hard, I can make things happen. But you'll get to a point, working hard isn't enough. You have to have the right judgment. That's why I'm saying it is. So therefore, how do you get to the right judgment? Thinking bigger picture, etc. If you adapt a kind of thinking that is bigger picture, multi-stakeholder, objective, curious, giving the benefit of the doubt to others, but having times to reflect, think, then you can change probably more easily, because you put a bit of a distance between what's happening and yourself, and you can look at it.
Where does humility fit into this model? Because the example you gave me kind of reminded me that it's okay to have some humility.
Yes.
Because if you reward yourself too much excessively because things are going beautifully, you've done this, you're responsible for it, everybody admires you, and yet you know that the future will be bringing some surprises.
Yes. There are deeper things beyond this, and there's so much that could be said about humility, integrity, all of that. But I tried to keep this model as simple as I can with 4 or 5, with the following hope. If you start with one of these things, it's like, what does being courageous look like? And if you start asking yourself questions to go deeper and deeper and deeper, I think you will start hitting those points. That's why I'm saying this model is an evolving model. And it has to be personalized. Like I said, you didn't like one of this, take it out, put something else in, because it has to be you. But at the end of the day, I think any one of these roads will get you to those more fundamental building blocks in somebody's foundation.
Gets you started.
Yes.
Deeper.
Yes. Because that's such an important characteristic. When you achieve success, if you attribute that success 100% to yourself, I did it, yes, I did all of this, etc., you are actually harming yourself because you're ignoring all the contextual elements. We have so many cases where, somebody could be working in a marketplace where we have a very strong presence, where we have a very strong system, where we have very good suppliers, agencies, all sorts of things. And when that comes together with that individual's capabilities, that individual looks great. Then you say, man, I'm good. Then that person gets moved to another environment where the marketplace were not as strong, agencies are not as good. All of a sudden the person gets exposed. The worst thing is you're not aware of this, and you come into it thinking you're really good, then you get shattered. We're all human. We're all on a learning trajectory. The key thing is to keep making consistent steps, to add to your skill set, towards a vision of what is good. And don't be afraid of keep changing your vision too, by the way, because you're at the very beginning. That's what I did. I had visions in age 30, 32 that I look at now and laugh. And I'm sure 10 years from now, I'll have a vision, I'll look at this one, and I'll say, but it's good. It just keeps you on a direction. You keep, we'll all get to the same place from different directions and different journeys. But that is most important. So what do you do with this model? We, as Dr. Çavuşgil said, I've developed it, I'm writing it, and there's more details, and each one of these things could be 50 minutes of discussion. Not one way. It's a discussion amongst yourselves of what it means. So here is what I would say. First of all, consider it. Think about it. Talk about it. Is that a good picture of success, picture of good? And don't be afraid of doing your own. When you're in a position, you land your first job, hopefully, have a vision of what good looks like for yourself. Don't put so much pressure on yourself that you won't know in day 1. You won't know in day 3, month 1, or month 3. But when you're in it for like few months, 3, 4, 5 months, you can start having an idea about, yes, that's a good version of me. That's a good me in this role. Have something. Consider this, but have something. I talked about, if this is the global competencies, I've talked about all the different dimensions that define a global company. So think about the kind of place you're in and the kind of international connection the business has and your own role. Within that context, think about this. If you consider to use it, do it within that context. The third thing I would say is do not waste your worst experiences. This is the mistake we make. We get through a devastating thing. We go and you say, I'm going to look forward and go. But that's where the learnings are. Believe me, the biggest learnings you're going to have in your career is from your worst experiences. If you can put a little distance between that experience and yourself and think about it, what happened, why, in an as broad, multi-stakeholder way as possible, you will have learnings. Don't waste them. And don't just stay on the treadmill. You run every day. You run every day. Get off the treadmill, sit back, have time to think, and have friends around you that can have honest conversations, because we all learn differently, but the way that I learned is whenever I have a conversation about something that's bugging me, and if I'm talking to the right person who doesn't have an agenda, that's very important. You know, if people have agendas, then you can't talk to them, but who really is your friend and care, have those times. And that's how I would use this model and keep evolving it. What can you expect? In our day and age, this kind of depth is not necessarily rewarded. I think it's appreciated very much, but it's not necessarily rewarded. So I would say be practical. This is a very long-term vision. You develop yourself for the long term, but you have to balance long-term and short-term. And in the short term, there might be expectations from your boss, etc. Don't pursue this at the expense of what is expected from you in the short term. Balance the both. But also, don't follow this model because you think it's going to be rewarded. Follow this model because you think it's right. That's why I'm saying it's got to be your model. You believe it's right, and follow that. So I don't want to raise a lot of expectations. And unfortunately, we live in a very different world. So, and do not expect immediate successes, overnight successes. But what you can expect is if you walk a consistent path of growing yourself, developing yourself towards a vision, and you follow that, you will get to a point that you realize you've actually accumulated a lot of wisdom. You've accumulated a lot of learning that others don't have. And usually, people can't talk about it. They see you as different, special, ooh, something's there. It's a bit like in the detailed wirings of an organization. Some organizations are like say, take, for example, Chick-fil-A. I mean, every time you go to Chick-fil-A, you feel good. Take another one. Do you feel some other customers, some other restaurant you go? No, because there's something in that organization that works. But you can only see it, but when you go into the details of this organization, they are doing the right things. Now, for your competencies, it's a bit like that. You keep doing the right things. Eventually, you will have a competitive advantage that is hard to replicate, is what I'm saying. So, I wanted to give you a little bit of a thinking exercise. I'm not going to be back to check on it. But if I ever got your curiosity a little bit up and you want to do it. So take just this behavioral characteristics. An inclusive person, an innovative person, an empowering person, and a collaborative person. that you can see in those behavioral characteristics. Then think about, so put yourself on a matrix. Your matrix is what kind of a global company you find yourself in. Even simplify it. One with roots or one with tentacles. You can simplify it that way. And then what kind of a position you find yourself in. You're in field or headquarters, or you're in front-facing. So then write a scenario. So I'm working for Google in the field location, and understand Google's business model. Does it have roots or tentacles? So create that. And then take this behavioral, take one or two of these things. And if you're in an entry-level position, what does it mean to be innovative in this? Or what does it mean to be inclusive in this? And the only reason I'm asking you to do this is to add dimensions to your thinking in terms of the kind of global companies that you can find yourself in, kind of situations you can find yourself in, and to prove yourself that these dimensions and those characteristics in that dimension have applicability wherever you are, whatever you are. They just have different things. So I'll throw you an example for that from Coca-Cola. So let's pick innovative for an entry-level position in a field location. So you just joined Coke in Argentina, and you're working in marketing. So try to think about the approaches you can bring to the job. You can say, I'm very new. I'm just going to do what they tell me to do, because I just want to make sure I'm successful. I deliver on what people are asking me to do. That's one end of the spectrum. You're not being very innovative. You don't have to rush into this. What I'm saying is you have this vision. Over time, you'll get there. But if you always have a habit of, I will do what I'm asked to do, then you will never grow that dimension. But over time, if you start asking the question of why? Why am I being asked to do this? Oh, because I see, because if I do this, I can improve the brand equity. Why do they believe that if I do this, the brand equity will improve? Oh, here there is some research, and this research indicates that the consumers in Argentina value this, and therefore I'm being asked to do. So if you follow this path, now you can't drive your boss crazy asking 10 whys every time you're asked for something, but you can't live without asking any why either. That's why I'm saying it's balanced. So innovation starts with curiosity. And then having that habit of doing that eventually will get you to a position where you can actually contribute. Because believe me, in the business world, as I said, our collective wisdom is never perfect. Never gets the truth 100%. There's need for every associate, every employee to contribute. But if you have associates who only do what they're told, they won't be contributing that. You see what I'm saying? It's play it with yourselves. Get into groups of 2 and 3. First, do a little bit of research on these companies, their business models. What's their international business model? And create scenarios, and then ask yourself the question, what's a range of low to high behavior in each one? That's the exercise. It just will sort of warm you up to the idea, I guess. So I don't know how we're doing in time. Good, and leave a little bit of time for questions and answers.
Yes. And on the last one, if I could just comment and a question there too. So in business, we have what's called the best practice. So young man or young lady who gets assigned to go to Argentina and inquires what is my job description, and they say, okay, this is what we expect you to do, and this is what we found over time to be the best practice. Just go ahead and apply it. But then you're encouraging them to be open-minded and thinking that there is always room for improvement. But then you have to look at your environment and to see what is the tolerance for deviating from best practice or trying something new, experimenting. So how do you get that sensitivity to learn about your environment, your boss and your new workplace, and take a bold action in a sense, deviate from the comfort zone? What would you suggest that you would do, and how does it work?
Yes. You know, probably the general rules about that are very simple and you could guess. You have to be sensitive to people's sensitivities, because at the end of the day, what you want to get accomplished, you can't accomplish it on your own. You have to be supported, either by peers or your boss. So in order to gain support, you really have to understand your environment a little bit more. What are people sensitive to? What is important? Now, once you do, if what you're trying to do is sort of very different and you expect a lot of objections, you then need to think about, well, first of all, are those objections legitimate? Are they real? If so, you probably change your mind. But if you have a point of view that those objections, you really can look at it another way, then your communication skills become important in a non-threatening way, in a win-win type atmosphere. So in other words, what do you not do? Let's say you have this great idea that you know that your boss or somebody else thinks it's a stupid idea. You don't go into a meeting and just throw that idea, and then they're going to kill you. You have to sort of patiently work in offline meetings when you're with people one-on-one. You can, instead of sort of asserting your point of view, you can ask questions. You can get answers. So being aware of the sensitivities of the key decision makers and the people. Being prepared for non-threatening conversations to slowly get the people who need to support you to a point. Now, in the process, you would learn and you would change too. Now, this sometimes is difficult because you don't have time, etc. Then it gets to the point of picking your battles. You cannot fight every battle in a big organization. Then you have to decide which ones are the ones you're going to pick and then spend this kind of effort on it. These are some of the general approaches to it. Again, I would say this is in balance. It's very fashionable to be politically incorrect these days. But even there's a balance.
This is, this can be what you have provided to us today is wonderful. One can look at it as a tool. You go through the checklist, but I think what you're trying to say is more than a tool. It's a philosophy. It's a roadmap, a guide to make ourselves into a very exciting future and come back and check ourselves to what extent we are, first of all, on the right track, and then also believe in something that we have created for ourselves. So it's an example, but then you can develop your own customized version by adding and deducting. Let's get some reactions from the students. We want to give them the time. Sure. So, but what do you think? First of all, does this make sense?
Yes.
Have you seen anything like this? Is this helpful?
Oh, yeah.
Give us a little bit more. Say a little bit more.
But I want to hear questions. Yes.
All right.
And your name, please.
My name is Mr. Steve Nairo. This has been really helpful. To keep context, a company that I saw going down, which is Blockbuster. They were really not as inclusive in comparison to their competitor. Online, they didn't want to do the stuff online, so they ended up going down as a business. So I took the model and made a comparison, and the whole picture just came through.
Yes, it all comes together. They misjudged probably the future. They couldn't change. Probably there were people who weighed heavily into the conversations to convince that that's the path they needed to do. Therefore, there wasn't inclusive. That means if you're not inclusive, it's hard to find a collaborative working environment. So all of that, it's a whole picture. But we're never, it's never like all good or all bad. We're always on some stage in the evolution. And then you could look at this mirror and say, start with yourself, what am I missing? What do I need to work on? How did I perform this last year? So, yes.
So I really love how you talked about it's never an overnight success, because that's the thing, especially with our generation, like social media and everything, like you only kind of see what people want you to see, and it seems like everyone becomes an overnight success or something because you only see the good things. And like when you talked about that, it's not about really focusing on being successful, but more so focusing on bettering yourself and focusing on you, and then the success will come once you really do that.
That is the point. That, absolutely. And it's progress over perfection, as I'll always say that. Make sure you're making progress.
Satisfy yourself first. Yes.
What dimension of this did you think you lacked when you first kind of started, out? And it would have been very important for you to have at the beginning.
Yeah. I have to look back and think about that, because I've probably developed this, started thinking about this maybe 8 to 10 years ago. So I was already, past the mid-career. But if I looked back and reflected on this, I probably were weaker on, empowering and collaborating. I mean, I just wanted to do it myself. And it's so easy when you start as an individual contributor. And it's so easy to individually contribute. It all depends on you. And then the change from that to say, okay, there's a group dynamic. That's not easy. So
that's why students prefer individual assignments rather than team assignments.
Yeah. But that is important. Then because I think I was raised in Turkey during a time where we had inflation every year of 80–90%. You know what inflation does to people? It makes you short-termist. Our associates, when they got their salaries, they would immediately take what they need for the next 3–4 days, and then they invest the rest in overnight interest, because they could get yearly interest of 120%. Because if they didn't, their money is going to be worth less. So then they go next 3 days. So you're thinking very short term. Inflation makes you very short termist. So your strategic thinking gets, when you're too much short term, you're not long term. So probably those, I would say, were the ones, but who knows how I was, you forget. So. Yes.
My name is Jenica Toussaint, and I would like to thank you, Mr. Bozer, for coming in and speak to us. I really like how you talk about contribution, how we can contribute to organizations. And I like this model because I feel like we can apply it to our personal lives as well as, in a company. So when you say contribute to an organization, and you gave that example of that young man or young lady who got that job in Argentina, I'm thinking, the first thing, yes, my goal, if I were to be in that position, is to contribute to the company. But I would think of it in a more long-term goal, because I just moved to a new country, and I would think my short-term goal is to, first of all, get adjusted, and then follow instructions so that I can understand the company. And then in the long run, I can, start, contribute more and, understanding the goal of the organization. Why am I assigned to do certain things? That way I can, grow more. But I think in terms of innovation, some short-term goals could be to get adjusted or understanding the culture of the organization and the environment where you are located as a new worker.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing.
Yes, and that's exactly what you should do. That's why I'm saying this is sort of you're going to have to apply your judgment and think of this as saying there's all like a warning sign. When you've now 4 years into your role and your habit has become just doing what people tell you, just remember that. But so work towards a vision of that. Yes, in one day I want to be able to contribute this. So therefore, I'm going to get adjusted and do everything I have to do. But I'm also going to be curious to learn. There is no harm in doing that. And when it's the right time, you start. So don't forget that is what I'm saying. And please don't take any of this to mean for you that you have to go out and immediately act on this. As I said, this is a long-term vision that you should keep in your mind's eye, and you should view things with this. You should start making progress. But you have to balance long-term and short-term. Yes, 1, 2, 3, we'll do that. Okay.
I guess I have a question as far as foundation and what's tied into the belief and leadership aspect of it. And so I've been in like a management role position now for about a year in ad networks. But my issue is that by the longer I've been there, the less I've actually believed in the company. Not as far as the direction they want to take, as far as kind of the financial side of things, and if they can reach what they want. The hardest part I've been trying to overcome is being in that management role, having a team under me, and trying to have them progress as well as me. But then in the background, I don't believe in the company. So I don't know if that's something that you just kind of have to follow through and overcome that, or if it's something that's going to be kind of sit in the background.
Excellent question. Thank you for asking that. This just helps me say one more time that this is not so black and white. You have to apply a lens of practicality. So let's take your situation and what are your practical realities? There's nothing, and thank you for being so honest. You have to be very honest with yourselves on how you feel. Otherwise, you'll keep fooling yourself and you'll get into more trouble. You're saying that I'm not sure if I believe this company for that. Okay, but I'm in a management role, and how do I deal with that? Now, here is the practicality lens comes in. Now, does your life require you to stay in this place for, let's say, next 6 months? Okay. You know that you have to be here. Okay, you might say, maybe I should be looking at plans to get out. Yes. But to the last minute, see, this gets into a deeper foundational integrity value. Until the last minute, you have to be a good steward of your company, of the role that you play. You are a human being. It's okay that you might have lost your belief. But you have a responsibility to your people that at least they never ever think that you lost your belief. Right. So it's almost like a father or a mother that you're going through a problem, but you should absorb that problem. You should absorb it and don't, because that's your service to your company. Now, on the other hand, the other thing you should do is your belief founded on good facts? Maybe your belief, maybe the reason you're worrying about it is, maybe you're worrying about the wrong thing, maybe not. So if you're absolutely sure that you're losing belief, you should actually get out, move to somewhere else. But only after being sure. Now, usually the way these things happen is that you get curious, you ask, you research, you're not 100% sure. Time will tell you. as you start thinking this, you will see other things and other things. At some point in time, you're going to say, you just feel it here. I know it's not going to work. My son just went through this. I know it's not going to work. And then he made his move. But until then, you have to keep that in one compartment, and you have to keep your leadership responsibility in another compartment. Now, when I say don't let them sort of feel it, I'm not asking you to lie. So you have to produce your own story. Now, this is a matter of style. I had a style of being open and authentic. Because I chose to be open and authentic, I had to produce a reason that I believe why I'm still giving the benefit of the doubt. But because I'm still here, I have to remain positive. Look, nothing in life is perfect. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But you can always have a realistically positive outlook. If you have lost that for your company, you can never ever have a realistically positive outlook. You should get out. You should get out. But as long as there's that space, I would err on the side of using that space and having that communication with your people. But on the other hand, keep watching. Let's not be stupid about it either. I hope that's clear. I'm so sorry that I can't give you black and white answers like this, but that's how it is. So, yes.
I think we may have time for
I promised to. I think you had one, and
You had one, yes.
I hope my question.
You changed your mind?
I just don't know. You said nothing is really black and white here, but out of all of these high potential profiles, which one made you different when you started out years ago? Which one, made you different from the crowd?
My belief is I skipped this. We said, Western education is analytical. It is time for all of us to dial up the synthesis, to try to keep the total package in mind. Always keep connections. Always connect. Integrate. Not many people do this. Everybody's just focused on their little thing. If you're in a job, just look at what you produce gets used by whom, and what happens to that. And then you start branching, at least just go out a little bit and think bigger. So it is trying to be integrating and trying to think about the big picture, bigger picture, is what made me feel better, I should say. So when I was in the role of CFO for the bottling organization, you can immediately see that. You could just focus on making sure that the books are right and everything comes out on time. But this financial information is used by others, and actually can be used by others for the benefit of the company. When you start asking that bigger picture question, you become more curious. By the way, you do this, you work, unfortunately, much harder. You spend more time. People around you would say, well, you're all work. That's part of it. Nothing is easy because, and I think you have.
Yes, I just have a comment. I think that this profile actually enables people to become better leaders or more effective leaders, because it touched on so many different facets that a person would have to draw from. And they don't have to necessarily have a CFO title within the organization. They can lead from wherever their position is by presenting themselves in that way. So that's what I see from this profile, that if you develop those things over time, it will actually help you to lead in whatever position you're in at that company.
This is what I believe. As I said, I've not done one iota of research, but I think it has applicability at any level in any organization. That was the intent of producing this. So what is the truth that I believe that's the answer to that. But like I say, if I was talking to you guys 2 years from now, it will change. That's how it should be. Now, or it might have a nuance. Some of these things may not go away. But do we have one more question? Or?
I wanted to understand what was the motive behind this model becoming a reality? What caused you to think of, okay, I have to make something like this?
Yes. It was two reasons. First of all, I wanted to be objective about, first I had responsibility for assessing people, so I wanted to be objective about that, but I also wanted to be objective about my own self and growing myself. So these things are not like math. You can't be so objective. So what kind of a model can get me to it? Now, believe me, in businesses, you have help for this. Human resource departments will bring you, like, this is how you should be. But the other thing, I looked at it and I said, because the reason I said that is what I'm experiencing is not reflected here. That's the thing, you know. There was a wonderful saying by Buddha, or but one of them, like, whoever, like, whether you hear something from your parents or your teachers or your religious authorities or whatever, says, don't believe any one of them. But after you consider all of that and live it, after you consider all of that and believe that to be right, then live it. That's why I would always, when somebody tells me something, I give you one final example. We're talking politics with someone. So this person said, well, I'm fiscally conservative. So I said, what do you mean? Fiscally conservative, what do you mean? I mean, that's Republican. I said, sorry, but as I researched this is a term only used in the United States. And it is such a wrong term to describe the wrong thing. First of all, you have a term called fiscal, which refers to government's budgets. You have a term called monetary, which refers to money flow in the economy. And you have a term called economic. The rest of the world calls this economic liberalization. But when you say liberal here, oh, no, that's Democrat. So even that term, you look at Wikipedia, it's like fiscally conservative. We use this word. I try to understand what people mean by that, because it doesn't describe what they're trying to see. We're talking about a free enterprise economic system. To me, economic liberalization, which means liberal means people are free. That's what liberal means. People are free for economic. So, yeah, but this is what I'm saying. It won't be recognized. They discount you, because that's how we talk about it all the time. It's okay. You don't need to get into confrontations and things like this. But I'm using this example to say, you know, question it. So it was important for me to have a picture of good. And what I was being served as this, it just doesn't make sense to me. I didn't accept it because it came from the authorized department. I applied my own logic and own thinking. And therefore, I had to produce this. This is a hard way, but it really is a very teaching way that you learn. So
coordinating the global competency certificate.
All right.